everybody. Welcome to the Cornerstone Integrative Healing Podcast. So happy to be here with you. I'm Jenn with my co-host Kari, and we're really excited about our special guest today, Amber Bowers. She's a licensed professional clinical counselor. She also does something called NET, which is Neuro Emotional Technique. And we're going to talk about all these great things, but we were so excited to connect with Amber because, as you know, at Cornerstone, we very much believe and think that healing really needs to happen on a physical, emotional, and spiritual level. And so, as part of our education and ongoing support, we just really are just I'm actually like, sometimes my mind is blown how God, crossed our paths with other professionals that can really, help our clients to get to the next level, something that, we might not have an expertise in, but that, our clients could really benefit from. So I was super excited when Amber reached out to us and, asked if we could just get together and see how we could help each other to, help each other's clients more in depth. And so, Amber, you just want to start just a little bit about who you are, what season of life you're in, where you're at.
Yeah. So I'm a licensed professional counselor in the state of Ohio. I am the owner of Bowers Counseling and Wellness, and I'm also a certified Neuro Emotional Technique practitioner and eating disorder specialist, and a wellness coach. So I do provide treatment for clients in the state of Ohio and worldwide. And I found neuroemotional technique after going through some of my own struggles with health, with fatigue, feeling like I couldn't find answers, kind of led me more towards holistic care and chiropractic care. And once I learned about the technique, I just knew that I had to learn it to be able to teach my clients and use it with my clients because it's so much more effective and efficient than any other forms of therapy I've used in my 10 plus years of being a counselor.
Which is a lot because you've done outpatient, you've done intensive inpatient,
Yeah.
patient, inpatient. Yeah, you've seen a lot of sort of traditional, right?
Yes.
Psychiatric care.
Yeah. Yeah. I've worked in every single level of care with, active duty military, civilians, eating disorders, trauma, you name it. And constantly have felt like clients would cycle through, they would come back and we would kind of normalize, oh, it takes, seven, on average, seven treatment attempts for an eating disorder client to be able to reach recovery. And I just felt like it wasn't enough. We weren't doing enough for people. We were missing a huge piece of the puzzle. And once I started to dive more into the holistic health space and learning more about, especially NET, when it comes to that emotional healing for someone and how it can affect them physically too, it's changed my life and it's changed the life of so many of my clients.
Yes, I can say the same thing, Amber. I've long been exposed to NET since working in this field for 20 years. I've had it done on myself several times, and it really can be life changing
Mhm.
when you get to those, emotions that, cognitive behavioral therapy has its place for sure. But I think for using something like, we obviously don't do NET, so we recommend tapping or emotional freedom technique. And maybe you could just talk about, just a little bit of difference. Obviously, we're going
Mhm.
to get into NET because, I'm really excited. As you mentioned, I've had it myself. I think it's can be a key piece in healing for a lot of people. So and you might not be familiar with tapping, but that's what I figured. Can you just give them just a little bit of the difference between tapping and NET?
Yeah, so one of the things that I really like about NET is you don't have to necessarily choose something to address. We can kind of just trust that the body's going to lead us to what it's ready to release and where that is. Both techniques do use acupressure though. So in NET we use it a little bit differently, but we are using concepts from traditional Chinese medicine. We are using different acupressure points. We're not tapping on the points, but we are putting pressure on the wrist, and so we combine that with muscle testing and follow kind of like a script that leads us to where stress is being stored in the body and then being able to release that stored stress.
Right. And we've talked about it. I know Carrie and I have talked about it so much. How emotions literally are, they can be chemicals, and literally these neuropeptides get stuck, or the emotion gets stuck in the cell, and how important it is to process that, especially when you are on a healing journey. And there's so many layers, right?
Hmm.
Layers and pieces that you have to address, really. So, and maybe you can talk about your experience with the NET. Like, what was the shift for you?
So I went into NET pretty skeptical, but also hopeful. I went to my first seminar and I actually volunteered for what we call a body entry in NET. So NET can be used for so many different things. If you're struggling with something physical, if you have a certain pain, digestive issues, fatigue, like there's also a way of addressing those things. And so I went on stage for this demonstration for pain that I was having in my foot. And never in a million years did I think I would be on stage talking about this. Um, and so I go up and it ends up testing back to something that had happened when I was pregnant with my twins. And so during that pregnancy is actually when this foot pain started. And then it just continued after they were born. And the chiropractor that was doing the NET on me, he looked at me and he said, "Were your babies breech?" And I said, "Yeah, like, how did you know that?" And he's like, "Well, this is the acupressure point for turning a breech baby." And so it ended up coming back to like I was not ready for them to enter the world. And that was contributing to this foot pain that developed in pregnancy and some of those emotions that I had around that pregnancy and being pregnant with twins specifically.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, that's I mean, and those are the kinds of things, really they seem miraculous, but they happen very often with NET.
Yeah. Yeah. I did 2 sessions of NET on that and haven't had any pain in my foot since then. I mean, and this is foot pain that like I went and got x-rays done at one point because I thought there was something wrong with my foot.
Yeah, yeah, it doesn't surprise me though. I mean, NET is powerful.
Hmm.
So you want to just talk a little bit about then how did you integrated it with the care you already did, maybe even comparing, like, obviously, we talk about integrative, right? So using mainstream, maybe cognitive behavioral therapy, or maybe some of the therapies that you use along with the NET and some of the success stories.
Yeah. So with NET, the thing that I like about it compared to some of the more traditional forms of therapy is we're really, when we think about like those 3 brains, the reptilian, the mammalian, and the neocortex, the reptilian and the mammalian are more subconscious, unconscious factors, our survival instinct, heart rate, breathing, and our emotions. And then the neocortex is more of our thinking brain. So cognitive behavioral therapy is going to address more of that thinking brain. The struggle is 95% or more of what we do on a daily basis is driven by those
Oh,
subconscious or unconscious factors. So we're missing such a big piece of the picture. And so what I find in NET, when I have someone who, I've been doing cognitive behavioral therapy with, and they're setting the same goals and they come back to session and we're troubleshooting, okay, what were the barriers to completing those goals? Why did those goals not get done? We can only get so far. And so now that I've started integrating NET, I'm able to help people figure out on a much deeper level what are those other, physical or emotional blocks that are preventing you from doing the things that you're wanting to do. So it really helps to address the physical, the emotional, and the cognitive all together, whereas more traditional forms of therapy are only going to address primarily that thinking brain, that neocortex.
yeah, we talk about that a lot. We've addressed, that subconscious and accessing that subconscious. We do
Hmm.
something called the daily, or recommend something called the daily practice, where we have a meditation and we ask them to journal to sort of access that subconscious, because it's hard to do, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, and I love that, because yes, I don't think that's something that is probably addressed, mainstream. is that subconscious, which again, most of us, like you said, 90% we're operating from the subconscious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So go ahead, Kari.
I was just wondering, Amber, for those of us that don't, I mean, I know, I mean, a little bit about NET
Mhm.
at this point. Can you give us more of like, I don't know, a definition or like a process so that we can get more in our minds, like what this process looks like?
Yeah. So it is an evidence-based technique that uses, I feel like there's been such a craze around like biofeedback. So like NET uses biofeedback in the form of a muscle test, which we can kind of uh, describe that a little bit more too. But it helps then alleviate the impact of past trauma or stress on the physical and emotional well-being by again processing all three of those factors, the physical, the emotional, and the cognitive all at once. And so when I say we use the muscle test as a form of biofeedback, what we're doing is we are typically applying like a light pressure to someone's arm, and we're looking for a bodily indicator of change in response to a stimuli. So that stimuli is typically something that I'm saying as part of the script in NET, and we're looking whether or not that muscle is going to be inhibited or not. And that tells us different things about whether or not the person or the subconscious is congruent with what's being said. And so we kind of follow that script to be able to paint the picture, find the emotions, figure out what meridian, what organ systems we're dealing with, and then to be able to do that acupressure to then kind of tie it all together and release that from the body.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a way of determining or going deeper, I guess, with thoughts or
Yeah,
physical pain that you might be having. So it could kind of be either one. It could be
right.
related to an emotional issue that, it is more, I guess, is more emotional nature, or it could be really helpful for a physical pain
Hmm.
or issue, right? So it's both.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Um, I was wondering, I know that we mentioned tapping and we also mentioned that journaling technique that we use. So, say somebody has an NET session, would it be helpful for them to then go and like process different things that came up, or is it just those things,
Yeah.
cleared?
I mean, oftentimes the body continues to process things even after the session is over. And so I even warn people like sometimes they'll feel more tired after an NET session because that processing is continued. We also use different homeopathic sprays to help the body continue to process and support the body in that processing. And other techniques, absolutely, like doing deep breathing, doing the journaling, doing the tapping, especially if it still feels relevant for them.
Yeah.
The goal in NET is to really get it to a neutral place. So it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to prefer what you're working on, but to be able to get in a place where you're more neutral about it so that you can continue forward, more easily with whatever it is that you're working on.
Okay.
And neutral, by neutral, you mean not as triggered.
Yeah. So like less emotionally charged.
Right. Okay.
Hmm.
So as far as like, I know it probably depends, but you mentioned doing two sessions and your foot felt better. Like, is there a general amount of sessions you would recommend?
It really just depends on how much the person wants to work on, what they're trying to focus on. Most of the research that they've done on NET has been for like 3 to 5 sessions for one very specific thing. But I have clients that typically will see me like bi-weekly for an extended period of time because there's always going to be things that you can address and work on. But if it is something more specific to like a pain or something going on physically and they just want to address that and then be done, that's completely up to the person.
Yeah. And so in your mind, like, how does this fit in with other things that you're doing? How does this fit in with like, you feel like you're doing all the health things? Where does this fit in?
I feel like this is honestly like the foundation. If we're not addressing that stress and how it's impacting our body, I think it's going to be so hard to heal from other things. And so I feel like if this foundation is in place, it's gonna make you more receptive to the supplements you're taking. It's gonna make it easier for you to do all of the other, health focused things, holistic things that you're doing. It's going to minimize the impact of any harmful things that you may be not able to avoid. It's the emotional piece to me, and not just because I'm a therapist, but like just based on all the research too. Like I feel like that's the foundation for anyone that is working on healing.
Yeah, I agree. It does all fit together. And if you're working on removing different blocks and allowing cells and organs to function better, it just makes sense why this would basically amplify whatever you're already doing.
Yeah.
Um, how does this fit in if somebody is currently in like traditional therapy, like more like talk therapy?
There are times where I will coordinate care, if someone wants to come to me specifically for NET. Although I will say, like, probably like 99% of my clients that I see do NET with me because they have experienced it and experienced the effectiveness. So rarely do I have a client that comes to me for counseling and doesn't end up doing NET. But there's definitely, I mean, I'm always open to collaborating if they have a provider that maybe they already had really good rapport with, or they're addressing something more specific with. Um, it just depends. I just feel like oftentimes people end up finding that NET is more effective. And so it starts to become more of like the sole thing that they do because of that.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, about somebody that is listening that might have a lot of trauma in their past and maybe has went to traditional counseling and it, not that it's not been helpful, but maybe they're not making the progress that they want to. Like, how is this, how does it fit in with that? Like, is it really good for somebody that does have a lot of trauma in their past?
Yeah. And there's a couple primary differences between like NET when we focus on working through trauma and some more traditional forms of therapy, even things like EMDR. So with NET, your body's not gonna go to that trauma until it's ready to process it, which I really like as a provider because I'm less likely for someone to get really dysregulated in session. Whereas some of the other trauma techniques, you have to identify what it is that you want to work on, and then you're going there whether your body's ready for it or not. So that can be really triggering for people and really dysregulating. And also with NET, you don't necessarily have to talk through what comes up. So, I will test to see the concept that we're going after, and we'll look at, was there an earlier age where this concept came up? It may come back to a significant trauma. The person doesn't have to talk to me about that. They can just visualize that and then do the acupressure with the emotional points to then be able to help the body process it. So there can be more verbal processing, but there doesn't have to be the verbal processing like some other techniques where it can just feel more like re-traumatizing to continue to
Yeah,
talk through the experience.
Yeah, I was going
sure.
to say that about that's kind of one of the drawbacks, in my opinion, about the cognitive behavioral therapy is talking through it can sometimes, as you said, trigger things, cause the nervous system deregulation, and actually make them worse in the long run. And that's not the original concept anyway,
Hmm.
right? So when she's talking about original concept, usually, and I sort of want to explain this because for me, I didn't understand it when I first heard this. The original concept is when you first sort of experienced the emotion, and Amber, you jump in because I'm sure you'll explain this much better, please. But when you first experienced an emotion relating to maybe the current one that happened that's present mind, what happens over time is you have this original event, and then over time you kind of add to that emotion every time a different situation comes up where you experience that same emotion. So in cognitive behavioral therapy, you might be talking about the most recent, maybe major event where it came up. But really, what's important is going back to when it originally kind of seeded, right, in the
Hmm.
body.
Yeah. And that's another piece too that I really like about NET, because even for myself, I don't have tons of memories of childhood. And so let's say it came back for me of this original concept at age 5 of, feeling fear because of being left alone or something like that. And that might come up and I'll say, I don't know, I can't see where that concept came up at age 5. That's okay. You don't have to have the memory of it to be able to help your body process it. So we can still link up to the right meridian and be able to process that without having all the details of it.
Yeah, which is huge, right?
Mhm.
Because as you said, most of it's in the subconscious,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about what's called the FAST method and as something that they could actually go and do,
Yeah.
after this call if they wanted to kind of, I guess play around with it and experience a little bit of what it could be like in a session?
So FAST stands for the First Aid Stress Tool. And if you go to firstaidstresstool.com, there is a video description and a PDF that kind of describes it. But essentially what you're doing is you're using those pulse points. So the 3 pulse points on each side of your wrist. You would put your fingers there and put your hand on your forehead. These 2 points on our forehead, and why we do that is because these are our emotion points. And so you link up to help your body to process whatever is happening. So you could be having intrusive thoughts. You could be having really bad back pain. Whatever it is that you're struggling with, if you're feeling more triggered, you're just having intense emotions, you can do fast to help to kind of again neutralize whatever it is that's being triggered within you. It's not going to be as specific as NET because we're obviously not, indexing for time and figuring out that concept, but it's a really good tool that clients can use. I've even had clients that have come back after I first taught it to them. They're like, it seems like magic. Like, I don't understand how it's working, but it's working, right? And it's because it's addressing that nervous system. Like we're still able to affect all those different layers by doing that.
Sure. And so
Similar
when
to tapping, like with the acupressure with tapping.
so I know with tapping, you have a statement that you're saying.
hmm
Is it the same in nature of that? Would you recommend?
I just have people wherever your mind goes is usually where, like, I just tell people, let your mind go wherever it's going to go.
Mhm.
Because typically, whatever is coming up is what the body's wanting to process.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we'll definitely link that up.
Yeah, link that up, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure in the notes. But how about just how long do they hold, the pressure points over the
I usually say at least like 30 seconds to a minute. And once you start to do it, you'll kind of get an idea of what you're looking for in terms of that neutralization, or like some people describe it as just feeling like a little bit more distanced from whatever it is. So if you do it on one side and you're not noticing a change, then I just tell people switch to the other wrist because it just means that you're probably not on the right meridian. We have different meridians on each side, and on the PDF it shows which meridians and which emotions. I always tell people though, like, don't get caught up on like, wait, I have to find the meridian for this emotion. Just do it on each side.
yeah.
Um, and they'll kind of get used to like what to look for, what it feels like.
Yeah, I mean, even just doing it right then, literally, I mean, I'm pretty sensitive though. You can feel the shift. Like I
hmm
literally just took a deep breath.
hmm
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, this
Yeah.
has been super helpful. I learned a lot personally.
Yeah, NET is fascinating, and I think it's a technique that can be really helpful for a lot of our clients. So Amber, thank you so much for taking the time to just explain everything. And Amber's going to be, working with us more, hopefully.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I'm sure this won't be the last time, but we'll have all of Amber's information available in the show notes if you want to reach out to her, if you have any questions for us. Hello at cornerstoneintegrativehealing.com. We'd be happy to answer them. Amber, thank you so much.
Thank you.